So let's talk about money. Today, we're talking about remittances, the money that's sent home every month, the money your mother is expecting on the 28th, the money that pays school fees, keeps the lights on, and may or may not have funded a small, ambitious house renovation project that no one asked for, but everyone has an opinion on. Remittances are the most reliable financial transfer on earth, more stable than the stock market, more reliable and dependable than governments, more consistent than an internet provider. And yet, somehow, it's still the most expensive form of money movement in the modern world. We're going deep into the numbers, into the costs, the infrastructure, and perhaps most critically, the new American law that's quietly threatening to take a bite out of the money that keeps entire countries functioning. And more specifically, we're talking about Jamaica and Kenya. Together, the two countries received over $8.3 billion in remittances in 2024 alone. $8.3 billion. And I'm not talking Jamaican dollars or Kenyan shillings. This is from diaspora workers, many of whom right now are still trying to catch up on last month's bills, but are still faithfully sending $100, $200, $300 home each month. The loyalty is genuinely impressive, but the reality, let's get into it. So where does the money go? What does it cost to send it? And who's making money off of the transfers? And what happens when the US government decides to take its cut? Jamaica is a country of nearly 2.9 million people on the island, but here is the detail that changes the entire conversation. The Jamaican diaspora, Jamaicans living abroad, is equal to that of Jamaicans living on the island. So approximately 3 million on island and 3 million outside of Jamaica, which means Jamaica is, in a real economic sense, a nation that has outsourced a significant portion of its income generation to the United Kingdom, USA, to Canada, and then imports the proceeds. In 2024, Jamaica received 3.36 billion US dollars in remittances. In 2025, that figure rebounded to $3.49 million, an all-time high since COVID, and that was due to the Melissa hurricane. And speaking of COVID, in 2021, the absolute peak remittances accounted for 25.3% of Jamaica's GDP, making Jamaica the most remittance-dependent island nation on earth. That's $1 in every $4 in Jamaica's entire economy from people abroad sending it home. For context, tourism, the industry that everyone associates with Jamaica's economy, earned less. The diaspora is not supplementing Jamaica's economy. The diaspora is substantially underwriting it. 90% of Jamaica's remittances originate from three countries. The US alone accounts for roughly 70%, the UK 12%, and Canada 10%. The Cayman Island has a significant amount of Jamaicans working in the hospitality and the healthcare sector, and that equates to about 8% of remittances. This geographic concentration is Jamaica's single greatest vulnerability. And we'll get back to that when we discuss the new American legislation that should, frankly, be causing more alarm than it currently is. Here's the part that matters most when you're looking at the policy decisions. 85% of Jamaican remittances goes towards immediate survival, food, rent, utility, school fees, and healthcare, especially amid the ongoing recovery after Hurricane Melissa. This is not investment capital. This is not discretionary spending. This is grocery run, keeping the lights on. So yes, 85 cents of every dollar sent to Jamaica buys food, pays bills, or keeps a child in school. So when politicians talk about taxing remittances, they're not discussing a financial abstraction. They're discussing whether an elderly woman in St. Elizabeth can afford blood pressure medication this month, just so that we're clear on the stakes. Now, how does Jamaica compare to the rest of the Caribbean? The Dominican Republic received the largest absolute volume at $10.76 billion in 2024. Haiti, despite being a state near complete institutional collapse, received 4.11 billion. Now, for the dependency ratio, remittances as a share of GDP is where Jamaica stands apart. At 15%, only Haiti rivals the region. Trinidad and Tobago is at 1% or below. Barbados comes in at about 1.3%. And because of Guyana's oil boom, has essentially restructured its economy to the point where remittance dependency is becoming almost irrelevant. Jamaica's position is unique. It is not poor enough to match Haiti's dependency ratio, not wealthy enough to match Trinidad's level of wealth, and not strategically positioned like Barbados. It occupies a middle ground where the diaspora is genuinely essential and genuinely taken for granted by economic planning. If Jamaica is the reliable old engine that keeps chugging along, Kenya is the rocket ship. And I'm not talking about technologically, I'm talking about the trajectory. Kenyan's remittances crossed 1 billion in 2012, 2 billion in 2018, 3 billion in 2020, 4 in 2022, and 5 billion in 2025. In 2024, Kenya received $4.94 billion, an 18% year-over-year surge, making it the fastest growing major remittance country in Africa. Since 2015, diaspora remittances have been Kenya's single largest source of foreign exchange, not tourism, not tea, not coffee, not horticulture. And here's the most shocking part. It has outranked any of the combination of the above. Now, here is what I personally think has helped to catapult the remittance growth in Kenya. It's a combination of the M-Pesa and the use of digital currency, say stable coins, from countries like the UK, US, Canada. That has helped to expedite for almost instantaneous delivery of funds. Now, for some of my American and Jamaican viewers, think of it as Cash App or Venmo, which is the ability to send money directly from your phone to someone else's phone. This is the ability that Kenyans are privy to when sending money from abroad to Kenya. Let me explain it further. With the advent of digital currencies and the movement of these monies and stablecoins across various blockchains, the movement of money has shifted to almost instantaneous delivery of funds. For those that are old enough to remember when families would send money and it would take 2 to 3 business days for those funds to clear, this is a different time. Now the difference in Kenya is that no one goes to collect funds. The remittance conveyance company is linked directly to M-Pesa, and that money is automatically credited to the recipient's phone. This is the Kenyan difference. And yes, this is one of the reasons why I chose Kenya, because it works the same way for individuals who repatriate or relocate to Kenya. You can still move money digitally, almost anywhere in the world, directly to your phone. This is what separates Kenya from virtually every other remittance-receiving country on earth. Now, I previously made a video where I did a deep dive into M-Pesa, and I will link it in the description below for those who want to dive further. In 2007, a Kenyan mobile network operator, Safaricom, launched a service called M-Pesa. M for mobile, Pesa is Swahili for money. And as a point of acknowledgement, I plan to do a deep dive into the real details of how M-Pesa was born. Now, let's get back to the conversation at hand. The idea was simple. Use a basic mobile phone, not a smartphone, a basic analog phone, like the old Nokia phone. That kind. The company used it to send and receive money via SMS. No bank accounts required, no physical branch visits required, and no Western Union. It works anywhere in Kenya where there's a mobile signal. And what happened next was one of the most significant financial inclusion events in recorded economic history. Kenyans started to move money. Kenya has a population of 56 million people, and there are upwards of 48 million M-Pesa accounts. That's a 91% market saturation. Before M-Pesa launched, 26% of Kenyans had bank accounts. Now, financial inclusion stands at 85%, with 42% of Kenyans holding only mobile money account, not a bank account, a mobile account. M-Pesa is now supplementing the Kenyan banking system. Think of that. Think of that. For nearly half of the Kenyan population, this is the banking system. That's the power that Kenyans have and the reason for the leapfrog growth in the remittance sector. Specifically for international remittances, M-Pesa integration means that money sent from Washington or London arrives directly in a mobile wallet in rural Kisumu in minutes. No pickup location, no identification requirements beyond a mobile number, and no branch hours to navigate. A grandmother in the Rift Valley can receive money from her daughter in Houston while sitting under a tree. That's the power of M-Pesa. One more thing. The International Fund of Agricultural Development scored Kenya a 97% out of 100 on its mobile remittance index, the highest score in Africa. And quite frankly, I think it should be the highest score in the world because PayPal, which is really a remittance company, if you think about it, has just integrated M-Pesa in their payment flow. Think about that. The British invented the concept of queuing. Kenyans invented the concept of not needing to. For absolute volume, and we're talking 2024 numbers, Kenya ranks fourth in Africa. Egypt leads at 22.7 billion in remittances. Nigeria, 19.8 billion. Morocco sits at 12 billion. Kenya at 4.9 billion and Ghana at 4.6 billion. In dependency ratio, remittances as a percentage of GDP, Kenya sits at approximately 4.6%, moderate by African standards. The Gambia tops the continent at 21.4%, Lesotho at 20.6%, Somalia at 13.6%, and Senegal at 11%. Kenya's story is not one of dependency. It's one of strategic advantages. The money is growing. The infrastructure for receiving it is world class. And the diaspora is largely professional, legal, and earning above median incomes in host countries. Kenya is, by most measure, the best positioned country in Africa for diaspora remittance growth. If you've learned something today, I want you to take a second, hit the subscribe button, and then the notification bell to be notified of any new uploads. Also, don't forget to click on the thumbs up button to let YouTube know that I'm doing a good job. Thank you, and asante sana. Now, let's talk fees, because somebody is making a tremendous amount of money off of the love that diasporan community send home every month. The global average remittance cost for sending $200 internationally is 6.49%. Now, let's look at the cost difference between Kenya and Jamaica. Now, Kenya's cost between the US and Kenya corridor is one of the least expensive remittance corridor in the world. Why? Because of the M-Pesa infrastructure. M-Pesa's infrastructure reduces the last mile delivery cost by a substantial percentage. Now, let's look at the cost for Jamaica. The corridor average for sending $200 from the US to Jamaica is approximately 6 to 8%, with the cheapest option in the 2.5 to 3% range. Traditional cash-based channels run much higher. The comparison is stark. Using Wise for both corridors are roughly equivalent of 1 to 2%. But the moment you move to a traditional agent-based or a cash-based pickup, Jamaica costs 3 to 10 times more than Kenya. Why is Jamaica more expensive? Firstly, the Jamaican dollar is less liquid internationally. Secondly, Jamaica's licensed remittance locations have actually been shrinking down to 492 island-wide in 2024. Third, Jamaica's diaspora, though larger than the island's population, has less competitive pressure when you talk about reducing the service fees. In other words, we don't have enough clout to put downward pressure on those fees. Lastly, de-risking the withdrawal of international correspondent banking relationships has hit the Caribbean, resulting in less competition and higher rates. Now, here's the part that the adverts don't mention. Every provider that advertises zero fees is making their money somewhere, and that somewhere is almost always the exchange rate. Until there is a body that can advocate for this and laws put in place, nothing will change. Unfortunately, nothing will change. These are bankers at the end of the day. On the 4th of July, 2025, Trump signed the One Big Beautiful Bill Act into law. That is the actual name. Moving on. Among its many provisions, a 1% excise tax on outbound international money transfers, effective the 1st of January 2026. The original proposal was for 5%. It was negotiated down to 3.5%, and they approved 1%. But regardless of that, this is what is going to take place as a result of that 1% excise tax. Here's the critical detail. The 1% tax specifically exempts transfers from U.S. account via ACH or wire transfer. It also exempts transactions made with US issued debit or credit cards. This is not a uniform tax. This is a tax on certain payment methods, specifically the ones most commonly used by lower income, underbanked, and cash dependent senders, i.e., migrant workers, undocumented workers, and unbanked individuals. In practice, this means that the tax will fall most heavily on precisely the people least able to absorb it. We're not talking about a tax for eliminating drug purchases. We're not talking about a tax for alcohol and cigarettes. We're talking about a tax on people trying to send money to loved ones back in their home countries. Now, Jamaica is exposed to this tax in two ways. First, through direct impact on senders using cash channels. Jamaica's remittance infrastructure still leans heavily on a cash agent-based remittance. And number two, through immigration enforcement. Let's say there are 57,000 undocumented senders, averaging 3,000 to 5,000 annually. That's roughly about $280 million annually. Now, you might say that 1% remittance tax is only 2.8 million per year, but do keep in mind that this is a small percentage of all Jamaicans. And also keep in mind the tax collected from all other immigrants and individuals sent into other nations. Kenya's exposure is structurally different. Most send money via digital platforms. They link their bank accounts to the remittance companies and remit that way, which then gets remitted through M-Pesa, thus eliminating that 1% tax. For context, the US is currently the only major remittance sending country to impose this dedicated 1% tax on outgoing transfer. So what have we established? Jamaica and Kenya are both sending and receiving vastly different amount of money through vastly different infrastructure. But with one crucial similarity, people who are sending are doing so out of obligation, out of love, out of understanding that they need to support back home. Kenya has built the infrastructure to receive that money efficiently and cheaply. The world's highest rated mobile remittance infrastructure costs under 1% for the right remittance agent. A grandmother in rural Kenya can receive money from Houston in under 3 minutes on a basic phone without ever having to step into a bank or a cash agent. Jamaica has the love and the loyalty of a diaspora that outnumbers the home population and contributes 28% to its GDP. But the infrastructure is aging, the costs are high, de-risking is shrinking the network of licensed providers, and the new American legislation is skimming from the top and creating a headwind for the most vulnerable senders. And here is the uncomfortable truth that sits underneath all of this. The global financial system has spent decades making it cheaper and easier to move millions between hedge funds than to move $200 between a nurse in London and her mother in Montego Bay. The global average remittance cost is 6.5%. The G20 set a target of 5% back in 2011. Drop a comment with how much you pay to send money home. I want to know. And if you found this useful, share it with someone who needs to hear it. The money is moving. It will keep moving. Diaspora communities have survived 2 world wars, multiple financial crises, a pandemic, and an ever-rotating carousel of immigration enforcement policies. We will adapt to this one as well. But it should not cost this much to send love to your family from far away. This is Jamaican in Kenya. Thank you for watching all the way through to the end. I appreciate your support with a like, a share, and a click on the subscribe button. Until next time, lekomor, or as we say here in Kenya, Baadaye.